Good morning, everyone. In April of last year, Marwan Tabbara was arrested by Guelph police for assault. And, it says in April of 2020, Tabbara was arrested by officers with the Guelph Police Service and charged with 2 counts of assault, 1 count of break and enter, and committing an indictable offense, and 1 count of criminal harassment. And then in August 28th of 2020, so he was arrested in April 2020, August, MP Tabbara's assault trial pushed to September. Right? And September didn't happen, and October didn't happen, and November didn't happen. No. The Guelph Mercury is reporting yesterday, MP Tabbara's court case put over to next month. You know what? Let's do it on the 1-year anniversary of the arrest. How about that? How about we do that? How about let's not and say we did. April 16th, the case returns to court. So Marwan Tabbara has been governing over us for a year after being charged with all of these offenses. Nobody seems upset with that. He's not a Liberal caucus member, but he hasn't been stripped of his powers as an MP. And isn't that interesting? They just kick it down the road. I wonder how long they'll kick it down the road. I mean, I don't know if he'll campaign as a Liberal. Probably not, right? But it looks like the Liberals are in campaign mode, according to the Conservative Party. The Liberals are focused on an election, not Canadians. They're putting themselves first and everyone else last. The only reason I did this I flagged this, is because I wanted to quote this. Trudeau said to me, this is Jagmeet Singh, on the phone, before that's his plan. Trudeau is clearly looking for an election. It's clear that they're looking for an excuse to go to an election. And that was Jagmeet Singh on March 11th, 2021 at Power and Politics. I think that's interesting, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think Trudeau's been looking to regain his majority, and Aaron O'Toole has been very weak. We'll talk about Aaron O'Toole in a little while. But first, here is universal basic income. Here is CTV News. It says, Liberal MPs grassroots to push for universal basic income at party convention. Okay, CTV News is reporting. The idea of creating a universal basic income is being pushed by Liberal MPs and grassroots party members, young and old, from east to west, despite Prime Minister Trudeau's apparent lack of enthusiasm. It is among the top priority issues chosen for debate at the governing party's April 9th to 11th convention, following an online policy process in which the party says more than 6,000 registered Liberals took part. When Liberal MPs first proposed a universal basic income late last fall in their foremost policy priority for the convention, Trudeau didn't slam the door, but he did indicate a costly overhaul of the country's social safety net wasn't at the top of his to-do list in the middle of a pandemic that had already sent the federal deficit soaring into the stratosphere. And I think that it's interesting that Trudeau's saying, no, we can't do this. It's a little bit of like, you've got to push for this, and then when you push for this, okay, well, we'll do it. We'll find a way to do it because you guys want it so much, right? It's concerning, and this is the reason it's concerning. During the conversation, one of the people said, quote, basic income is a simple and attractive idea, but when you take a closer look, it turns out to be costly and ineffective, said one participant. Quote, this is a destructive inflationary policy based on fallacious assumptions and idealistic notions. This is not a liberal policy. It is disastrous communistic vote grabbing, said another. Yeah, so I feel like on one hand they're trying to politic a little bit with Trudeau, saying, "Oh no, I couldn't possibly, you know, we're already spending too much." And I'm gonna show you this in a minute, but the PBO already says we cannot make this spending permanent. I've done this article before. I've looked at this article before, but all of this spending has to remain temporary. Here's the PBO, and this is from 2020. This is from May 26, 2020, just at the beginning of this. Drew told the Senate National Finance Committee on Tuesday that the federal government cannot keep on the same spending path seen during the pandemic going forward, warning it risks putting Ottawa's relatively strong fiscal position on unsustainable footing. Quote, it's quite clear that we cannot stay on the same path we are on right now with a deficit of 12% of GDP, he said. It's not sustainable for more than a few years. And when I say a few years, I really mean just a few years. So there will need to be a sharp turn. Temporary measures will have to be temporary because if they become permanent at that level of deficit, it's not sustainable. Okay, it's not sustainable. And yet they want to bring in a UBI, and I feel like, oh no, I couldn't possibly have another, I couldn't possibly eat one more slice of pizza. Okay, I'll just have this one. It's a little one. right? Here is Rex Glacier. He says, because there's nothing going on in Canada where the Liberals can keep finding money for others, yet can't produce a budget in over 2 years to explain any of it. The Globe and Mail is reporting Canada commits nearly $30 million in assistance for Colombia as the country grapples with waves of migrants, and internal conflict. Okay. So Roxham Road is, COVID is, we don't need to, we've just got money to spare. You max out your credit cards. If your family hits a crisis, this is how the Liberal government would respond to your family's crisis. Max out your credit cards. Donate that money. Profit. That's it. That's all the plan is. Here is Miss Freeland. We don't have a budget. We don't have a budget to plan where this $30 million is coming from. We don't have a budget to plan where these vote buying initiatives are coming from. We don't have a budget for any of that. But Ms. Freeland's got time to announce an 18-member task force on women in the economy ahead of the 2021 budget. So at some point in 2021, we'll have a budget. Maybe New Year's Eve. Right, here you go. 2021. Deal with it. Merry Christmas. Who knows? That's a semi-serious prediction. But they've got time to, well, here's what the discussion around this women's economic task force is. Okay. Discussion during the summit focused on how the negative economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are disproportionately affecting women. Panelists urged the government to recognize this in crafting a promised recovery plan for the 2021 budget. Ms. Freeland said she views early learning and childcare as an economic triple play because it increases women's participation in the workforce, creates jobs in the childcare sector that tend to be held by women, and supports childhood development. Early learning and childcare, I really believe, is a feminist issue. It's a mother's issue. It's about caring for our children and giving them the best possible start in life, she said. It's an economic driver, too. The best possible start for your kids? Drop them off at childcare on your way to work. Because nothing says a mother's love like the daycare. And I mean, fine. If you want to do that, if that's what you want, great. But if you're a mom in COVID times who looks at the idea and the prospect of dropping their kid off masked at a daycare. Now, they don't have to be masked up to 2 years old, which is good news, right? But after 2 years old, if you don't have an exemption, they have to be mandatory masked inside and out in Ontario anyway, right? And so there's other factors. So the fact that the positioning of this is just hilarious to me. It's a mother's issue. It's about caring for our children and giving them the best possible start, which is clearly not you. You belong at the drive-thru. You need to be working, Mom. Affordable daycare, right? The best start for our children is probably hanging out with their mom, right? That's fine. And dad, right? Everybody, all their family, right? Seeing faces, smiling faces, making ridiculous shapes with their mouths. And, it's fun. And it's so sad that this is accepted wisdom, right? This is accepted wisdom. This is not even where we're going. This is well-trod path. This is what people believe. And if you say anything to the contrary, even if you're a woman who says, I'm very happy with the choice in my life to be a stay-at-home mom I've read the stories on Twitter or randomly, maybe Reddit, something, where people were being attacked because the woman got up early to make her husband lunch and stirred his coffee. And that was something that she did because she liked to do that for her husband. And they were like, oh, I can't believe you're so oppressed or something like that. They were saying that she was the traditional, she's self-identified as traditional. She was like, no, I'm quite happy to be a stay-at-home mother. And I want to do this for my husband. And I feel she said that she felt like it was her duty or something to that effect. But more than that, it made her happy. That's what she wanted to do. And that was the end of it, really. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But she was being attacked for wanting to do that. And I feel like this kind of speaks to what I was talking about the other day. The well educated people, the well-known wisdom from, everybody knows this, is that, of course, being a good mom means paying for good daycare, right? Of course, dropping them off at daycare is the epitome of motherhood while you go off to work, right? That is, yes, right? Of course it is. That's the only way to be a mother, right? That's the only way to think about it and act as a mother, right? If you want the best for your kids, you got to think about the economic driver that is the daycare, right? It's wild. It's so crazy. Here's Justin Trudeau. We don't have a budget. In case you missed it, we're extending the current rate of Canada's emergency wage subsidy up to 75%. The Canada emergency rent subsidy up to 65% and lockdown support 25% until June. We're doing this to help you get through these tough times. Could we just open our economy? That'd be great. Open the economy. Justin Trudeau says, if you own a business and you're looking for support, these programs are here for you and they could help you keep your doors open and your employees on the payroll. To learn more about them or to find out how you can apply for support, click here. Again, if you have a business and no customers, you've got bills, not a business. And the fact that the PBO has said, and I just read this through, so I'm not going to read it again, but basically that spending has to be temporary. It can't be permanent. And temporary means like 1 or 2 years, like 2020, 2021, and that's it. And here we are halfway through 2021. And it doesn't look like we're easing off the gas on that spending. We're revving her. There's a car engine that just turned on, so it's kind of funny. You guys didn't hear that, but I heard it. Okay, I've been talking about COVID passports, moving into COVID passports. And this is basically the same article, rehashed, focusing on a different aspect and using that to highlight a different aspect of the speech that Trudeau gave, which they do a lot in media. It's called like extending an article. Like you get 3 articles out of the one speech, right? Like you focus on the one aspect of it, you focus on the other aspect, and then you blend the two. Anyway, regardless, doesn't matter. But this is talking about it's tabling the idea in a different way about passports and travel passports and blah, 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 blah. Greg says, prediction, within the next 2 years, you'll require a COVID vaccine passport to renew your driver's license. Now, there's no fundamental new information in this article that hasn't been covered by yesterday when I looked at a couple of articles talking about the same COVID passports. But it's just kind of presented in a little bit of a different way. And it made Greg think anyway, it's probably, that's where we're probably going. This is probably the first balloon to test the public outrage and test the public response. And as we see no public response because everybody's playing the COVID game, right? This will likely be on track. And that's scary. That's not good. That's not good. When people are being segregated and made to show identification to have access to basic services within the community, not good. Not good. We're getting into very, very similar parallels to 1939 to 1944 and before 1930 to 1944. And the parallels are, not the booming economy, right? Like segregation and brown shirts and private armies and security details and all sorts of very concerning things. And we don't have to go down this path, but we are going down this path, right? Like, you see the difference? Like, we don't have to do this. This is, we can see examples of places that are opening with Florida's been open, Georgia's been open, and I know I have a big list, Sweden's open. There's all sorts of places that don't have this nightmare unfolding. There are all sorts of places that said, this is not tenable, we're not doing this. We don't have to do this. We're doing it. Okay? People have to speak up. It's not if everybody shrugs and goes, I guess it's coming, then it's going to be here faster than you think. Like, look at where we're at from a year ago. If somebody had told you in January of 2020 that we would have travel restrictions and essential items only and lockdowns as part of our regular everyday life, you would have said, you are a crazy person, get lost, right? And here we are. So, wow. Dr. Naomi Wolf says, okay, we're getting into the vaccine. Updated again, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Luxembourg, Iceland, South Africa, Norway, Denmark suspended the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now add Thailand. Iran never accepted it. Bulgaria, that suspended it. Now Congo. 14 nations. Canada insists on its safety. Do you think it's a batching issue? Do you think it's a batching issue? All of these countries are like, I don't think so. It's definitely a batching issue, right? That's the problem. Okay. Here is 580 CFRA Ottawa, okay? And they say, Dr. David Burt is a retired immunologist and part of the Black Scientist Equity Task Force. He says this was long overdue. Black medical experts host virtual town hall to dispel COVID-19 vaccine myths. Is this like backhanded racism against brown people? Like, here's 2 brown doctors and a white doctor. Can we, like, what's the... Why are we playing the race card first? If he wants to get in on this, fine. Like, great. What's this preoccupation with race is, I'm going to be talking about this in a little while, but I'll tease it right now. James Lindsay says, this is 100% true. Wokeism is a serious national security threat in a multitude of ways. From diverting resources to undermining science to fracturing unity to corrupting standards of our uniformed personnel. I actually can't properly articulate the number of ways that institutional and governmental acceptance of the woke ideology represents a severe national security threat to the United States and Canada, I'll add, or to any other nation that takes it up. So I encourage you to start thinking about it. Yeah. So and the reason that this is important is because this is taking doctors and saying, if you're not black, then we're not interested in hearing from you. If you're not part of some racial equity thing, right? Black scientist equity task force, then your voice doesn't matter, right? If you're Dr. Kaur, Dr. Gill, Dr. Phillips, sorry, man, that's a little bit light-skinned for our what we're trying to do here right now. Right? We're not going to take your opinion because, right? If you're Dr. Oh, who was that doctor who spoke out? The female doctor, the American female doctor. Oh, I'll have to find her. Hold on a second. I can't for the life of me think of her name, but this is the woman I think I'm talking about, and this group of doctors is what I'm referring to, like, or one of the many groups that I'm referring to, right? Like, it's very interesting, and I mean, this doctor fits in with what they're trying to do, but she's not saying the right words, so she's blacklisted too, right? It's very, very interesting. It takes the argument to a different place. It doesn't take the argument to where the science takes it. It takes the argument to race, right? It takes the argument away from what we should be looking at it, and it's very interesting because anybody who's speaking out against or speaking out for, hey, like we should really look at this, was silenced, viciously removed from professional bodies, removed from all sorts of different things. So it's very interesting to watch the division continue further, even as we try and move through COVID-19, because it feels like what Dr. Lindsay was talking about, I think it's Dr. Lindsay, was talking about with regard to taking resources away, disrupting unity, disrupting science, because you can't do science if you're more concerned about race, right? Like if all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, we're more concerned about what this group of doctors, because of their skin color, think. Very interesting, right? And if they think the wrong thing, then we'll just blacklist them and find other people who think what we want them to think, and then we'll highlight them. Very concerning. Roman Babber says, yesterday's stats confirmed that as public health measures continued, the number of excess deaths from possible indirect causes became greater than deaths from COVID. On January 15th, I wrote that lockdown is deadlier than COVID. Time to fold, Doug. Yeah. We need to get back to normal. Not normal with vaccine passports, not normal with mass testing, and I'll show you about the mass testing in just a minute. Not normal with the caveat of we've got an emergency brake that gives our medical officers of health dictatorial powers. None of that. And we need to have accountability for the people who've done this to us for a year with absolutely zero accountability and zero data to back it up. Where's the emergency? How does this qualify as an emergency? Because I never want this to happen again. I never want any politician to have the power to pull this bullshit again, honestly. And there should be a serious inquiry. There should be an election triggered. The people who've done this should all lose their seats. I'm talking municipal all the way to federal, all the way, all of it. And people may not want a federal election. I don't trust the election process. I don't at all. But there needs to be accountability. So it's unfortunate that I don't trust the election process, because it undermines the ability to get that accountability, right? If we had a fair election and people were quite happy with Trudeau and now are not happy with Trudeau, or if we had a fair election and they carried on with Trudeau, it's unfortunate because there's no possible way of having a fair election. The fear that has been manufactured through the media has done a very good job at changing the conversation. And the conversation isn't where are our civil liberties. It's how are you going to keep us safe from the anti-maskers? And that's a scary place to be, because if you put it out to a vote, those people will want to get those anti-vaxxers. They're not going to want to get the people who took their civil liberties. They can't feel that yet. They should, but they can't feel it yet. Moving into COVID, or more into COVID, here is a protest in Toronto. No, this is in Quebec. And this is the loudspeaker. Here we go.
You are ordered as a participant in a demonstration to wear a face covering. You are also ordered to keep at least 2 meters from each other. Refusal to obey either of these orders makes you liable to a fine ranging from $1,000 to $6,000.
So they've warned the participants, and there you go. Over the loudspeaker, if you're not wearing your mask, you could be subject to a fine if you're in this protest. So very, very scary stuff that we're living through in Canada right now. Here's the Toronto protest. Lots of people. Good job, Toronto. People are done with the big lockdowns, I guess. I was talking to some friends in Toronto the other day, and they were privately expressing. Now, I spoke with them earlier in the lockdown, and they were, and I think a lot of people in the first 6 months were like, yeah, okay, we got to do this and blah, blah, blah. Everybody was kind of on board. And now that we're a year into this, people are like, this is bullshit. And so that was where they were before. So I talked to them a few weeks ago, and they were like, oh, just before Christmas, I guess. And they were like, oh, we've got to, do what they're saying. And at the end of this, that'll be it. And I was like, you think that's it, man? Like, you think that's going to be it? I said, first, it's not going to be 20 days or 28 days or whatever they say it is. It's going to be longer than that. And second, it's not going to be done after that. I said, there's going to be more reasons to lock down. And they didn't believe me. And then last night when I was talking to them, they were like, this is bullshit. I was like, I was right and you were wrong. I didn't mean to rub it in, but I totally rubbed it in. But now they're done with it. And I think that there's a lot of people who are done with it. And that's good news. It's good news, but it's not so good news when they start throwing tear gas. This is Montreal police again. They're throwing tear gas into the crowd. You are part of a protest. We are going to tear gas you. Wear your mask. Right? Why is Toronto still in lockdown? This is Mark Toey. I follow him. He publishes his own thing. I think he was a writer for other people at some point, but I thought his 4 points here were worth a little bit of a discussion. So his question is, why is Toronto still in lockdown? Typically, John Tory, Dr. Davila, cite one of these 4 reasons. No point in opening up and then closing again. This is Tory's favorite go-to excuse. Quote, there's no point in reopening if we're just going to have to be closed again. I don't think there's anyone who would vote for that, he told CTV last month. He's used the same line or similar line in almost every media interview since then. Variants of concern are increasing. We continue to see concerning growth in cases with variants of concern, which spread more easily and cause more severe illness. Dr. Eileen Davila's favorite reason for keeping you locked down. There's lots of evidence some of these variants are more contagious than others. There's considerably less evidence they do more harm, though. But so what? This is dailymail.co.uk. It says Florida's paradox: cases plunge despite UK variant prevalence. I should have that queued up more often. I use that sound a lot. Hold on a second. Case counts are increasing again. This is another favorite excuse for restricting our freedoms, but it's not true. Even if it was, it's not relevant. Ontario's own data shows the daily number of new cases has been trending steadily downwards since the new year began. They've been flat since early February. Isn't that interesting? They said, if we get below 1,000 cases, we can undo the lockdown, says Williams. And then we get under 1,000 cases, and then magically we go right back up to 1,000 or 1,200, right? And we've been flat, right? Very interesting. Very interesting. Tune that PCR threshold, right? Just get it exactly right to keep us in just the right level of crisis, right? Just the right level of stay in your homes, citizens. We need to protect our hospital system. That's number 4. Yes, we do, says Toey, but we've already done that. The number of COVID-19 cases in Ontario's critical care ICU beds have been flatlined for months. There's no crisis in our ICU driven by the number of COVID-19 cases. So it seems really strange to be continuing to lock down despite all of these facts, but here we are continuing to lock down. In Calgary, police are entering churches to take pictures of congregants illegally gathering in Canada. So this is police entered a church to take pictures of congregants, right? That's concerning. That's very concerning. I would be very upset if people were coming in taking pictures of me at church, and particularly if they were police and they were doing that with the intention of using that information to say that I've done something wrong, right? Where are we in Canada that this is just fine, just fine for the cops to do this? Like, you know what we should do today? What? Let's go to the church and take pictures of everybody at the church. Okay. Should we do that at the mosque as well? No. Belinda Carriolis, moving into Ontario. This is great. See, here's the thing. I've put in a request to delegate again at the April meeting for the the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health. And I'll put together a 5-minute thing like I did before, and I'll say my piece like I did before, and they'll ignore me like they did before. And that's okay. I don't mind all that. That's fine. I do it because if you read it, if you get it into the public record, you can point to it and point other people to it and say, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think that any of this is valid? If you think it's valid, why do you think that there's been no answer? And it's not that I'm going to let them get away with no answer. That's not it. It's that there's exists no way to force an answer. There exists no way to hold them accountable for the answer. And that's part of why I'm doing this, to shine a light on the fact that there's no way to hold anybody accountable for this. And Belinda Carriolis does this at the provincial level, right? She's an MPP who's removed from caucus for disagreeing with Doug Ford. And so she was in the PC caucus, and she was removed from that. So now she's asking questions similar to Mr. Babber. And I'll play the beginning of this. Christine Elliott, I'll probably play Elliott's response as well. The response is interesting in that Miss Elliott says she denies that kids are having a negative outcome from this. And she says that they're getting used to wearing masks. But that's not the point. They've lost body agency. They've lost the ability to make a choice about their body for themselves. That's evil. That's evil. It's a violation of their rights, basically. Basically, at base, it is. And the Minister of Public Health doesn't see it that way, and that's very concerning. Ms. Carriolis asks a well-crafted question and has a specific... She knows the answer to the questions that she's asking, but the minister doesn't... doesn't give it. The minister doesn't engage with the questions that are asked by Miss Carriolis, and because the minister doesn't give the answers, it's like not very satisfactory. But the questions are valid, right? The questions are worthwhile. Here is all of that. Here we go.
Question is for the Premier. Last October, the government's regulations for stages 1, 2, and 3 of the lockdown, under the general compliance sections, mandates that masks be worn for anyone over the age of 2. This regulatory policy has been in place for months now. Can the government tell us whether it has any data that proves whether mandating that children 3, 4, and 5 years of age wearing masks has resulted in a decline in COVID-19 positive reported cases?
Thank you. The Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. We know through the recommendations made by Dr. Williams, our Chief Medical Officer of Health, as well as the Preventive Measures Table, a number of public health experts have recommended that masks be worn to prevent transmission of COVID-19, and we are following. It's important, even as people receive their first dose of the vaccine, we still need to follow those public health measures to keep Ontarians safe and healthy, and that includes keeping a physical distance, wearing a mask, when indoors, wearing frequent hand washing and the other provisions, until all Ontarians who want to receive a vaccine have received both doses of those vaccines that require 2 doses. Johnson & Johnson is different and only requires 1, but the mask wearing is going to continue to be important for some months yet.
For some months yet, she said at the end. For some months yet. Took me a minute to hear what she said. So she doesn't really engage with the question. She didn't give the data. She just said her talking points. Pivot to the talking point. Don't engage with the data. No problems, right? No problems. Move on. And that's not very satisfying. There's another. I was talking about, and I'm just going to tease this now. I'm going to add it and then come back into my usual patter, back into my flow. But I'm going to add this at the end. I forgot about this, and I wanted to talk about this. This is a situation where the questioner knows the answer to all the questions that she's going to ask. And this is former Liberal minister. She was a former Liberal minister, Alisev. She's now a shadow minister, and she's talking to Harjit Sajjan. She knows all the answers to the questions he's asking here, and she's playing chess with Mr. Sajjan, who doesn't catch up until the last question, which is kind of funny to watch because he puts himself in the corner, and then she makes the final move, and He doesn't answer, right? Of course he doesn't answer. They don't answer the questions they don't like. Okay, moving back into the usual pattern. Masks, we're talking about masks, talking about children losing their agency, talking about children losing the ability to say, you know what, I need to breathe right now. I have my face covered because the teacher tells me to, because my parents tell me to, and because I have to wear it inside and out and there's no breaks, but I want to breathe right now, so I'm going to take it off. And then they get in trouble, punished, right? And when presented with the question, what data do you have, Minister Elliott says, I'm pretty sure they're getting used to it. Pretty sure, and it's going to be around for some months yet. Some months yet means there's no end in sight, despite mask mandates being lifted all across the states, and I've been talking about that for the last couple of days. Very interesting. But here is further problems with the policies that have been rolled out. I think these are charter violating policies. I think these people are either they don't know or they don't care that they're violating people's basic rights. I think it's probably they don't care because they can't possibly not know. That it has to be within the conversation about this. And if it's not, why not? I don't understand people who are in charge of education and governing people, how they would be allowed to not consider the basic laws of the land. But it's not impossible that they're not considering the basic laws of the land. Roy Green says, parents tell me of robocalls from school principal. I have the script. 6-year-old must be quarantined at home for 14 days because another child in cohort tested positive. So 6-year-old with no sign of being unwell may not hug her mom. Listen today, Saturday, and hear infectious disease doctor. I've said before, I've said clearly to the health unit, your policies are enabling and recommending abuse to children, and it's not appropriate, and it needs to be ended, and ended as soon as possible. And again, ignore it. Pivot to something else, and let's please hope he goes away. And ultimately, eventually we're going to get to a new state of being where the kids aren't in school anymore, the masking is voluntary or something to that effect, and I'll go away eventually. But at this point in time, it's unbelievable that the policies that you have to fight for your kids' basic rights, and parents who don't understand that A, that they have to fight, or B, that they can fight, right? If they don't get it, then the kid is stripped of their rights without any kind of recourse, with no guardian, no anybody to say, hey, this isn't right. COVID isolation increases risk of immunological disorders. U of G immunologist. This is talking about, I'll highlight the important bits. Hold on. The risk that holds is that, quote, or ... our children, when they get older, will have an increased potential for their immune system to be dysregulated, and this can lead to their immune system misinterpreting what is safe and what is dangerous, said Bridles. This can cause individuals to respond inappropriately to things that are not dangerous at all, and that's where they can start developing things like allergies or asthma. It can also lead to autoimmune diseases where our immune systems inappropriately sense cells in our own body as dangerous and attack them. Bridle said he wasn't too concerned about the adverse consequences in the early days of the pandemic, as policymakers told the public they'd be looking at a temporary lockdown of around 3 weeks to flatten the curve and returning to some level of normalcy shortly after. Instead, Bridle said that we're now 1 year into an unprecedented lockdown with children removed from their natural environment and there's no end in sight. Scroll down. Bridle said it's frustrating as an immunologist to see this greater isolation continue. As he said, children are generally not at high risk from COVID-19. However, we've been keeping them out of schools and their typical environments. While Bridle admits there's no way of predicting whether a child is going to be negatively affected by this, as he said, that's dependent on complex underlying issues. He said that there will definitely be an increase in incidence of immunological disorders in children going forward. So I think there's interesting conversations happening. So that's interesting to see in the press at the very least, right? Here is Stephen Lacey, and they're talking about testing healthy people. So in the past week, 8,293 healthy tests were completed with a positivity rate of 0.5%. Is 0.5% within the margin of error, do you think? I think probably there's potential for false positives accounting for a lot of that. Anyway, this is in addition to over 31,000 tests conducted by the Ministry of Health for youth under 18 to keep schools safe. We're encouraging families to get tested, a critical layer of protection. Why? Testing healthy people doesn't make any sense at all. 0.5%. So why would the Ministry of Health care to remind us why healthy people are being tested? Is it just so CP24 can talk case numbers 24/7 as part of their public fear factory mechanism? It is concerning, right? Signing off for now, says Paul Ferguson, with the thought that we are testing 1.5 million healthy people each day looking for a virus while 5 million sick people can't get treatment. Wake up. Wake up indeed. Anthony Fury says, Ontarians obsess over the myth of rampant school outbreaks, even though there just isn't much in-class transmission actually going on. But when it comes to warehouse outbreaks, those appear to be very real and yet generate minimal media coverage and public discussion. I think that it's interesting that there's warehouses being completely shut down with public health saying, yeah, this is for your safety. Warehouses and large food processing centers account for 60% of reported workplace transmissions in Toronto, yet they've been fully operational, and small businesses have suffered massive losses. And when the small businesses suffer massive losses, that's not good for people. Like, that's not good for taxpayers, because that means more people are reliant on taxpayer handouts. And that's not good. That's not good. People who would be able to work, except that the government's bad policies are stopping them from working, are now relying on government handouts. That's bad. That's a negative outcome. Okay, that's not good. But that's where we're going. And they don't seem to care. They don't care. Okay, so I was talking about wokeism and how it's a danger to public health, how it's a danger to our society because it reallocates resources. I'll read some of this again. In a multitude of ways, diverting resources, undermining science, fracturing unity, corrupting standards of uniformed personnel. And so here's a couple examples of that in the broader sense. Our federal government is announcing $400 million in national active transport. Active transport's walking, running, biking, that kind of stuff. That's active transport. To a certain degree, transit, but not strictly transit. And this is the federal government getting into what municipalities typically build. So why is the federal government failing so badly on a response that is the federal government's job? And why are they, instead of dealing with their failures on that level, getting into municipal politics? They do this with provincial politics too. They find something that they think they can wedge. Jagmeet Singh does this all the time. Finds something that he thinks that he can wedge in Ontario to talk about healthcare, and all of a sudden he wants to be premier. Like, it's like he's talking about building hospitals and stuff. It's crazy. Like, that's not what the feds do. That's not their job. However, the federal government is spending $400 million without a budget to build bike lanes in municipalities, right? Do you think that that's a diversion of resources? Do you think that that's undermining? Well, it's undermining unity, fracturing unity. It's getting the feds in municipal politics, right? And they try to be heroes. Oh, here's all sorts of money, but the people on the ground maybe don't realize that that's not their job. It's not their job to fund that kind of stuff. Here's another one. Alberta government may be holding a referendum on daylight savings time. Jason Kenney. Seriously? Not a balanced budget? Electoral recall? Collecting our own taxes? Alberta police force to replace the RCMP? Why can't we ask the real questions? Like, why are we distracting from the actual stuff that matters, right? Why are you building active transport when we've had businesses shut down in Guelph for the last year? There's nothing to deal with here? Are you kidding? Are you joking me? $400 million for bike lanes? It's just wild. Like, I mean, what are you going to do? Right? Because, like I said yesterday, the people who just want the potholes built, the people who just want the basics covered and, like, leave me alone, aren't getting that. They're getting ignored. They don't have lobbyists to tell the mayors and the city councilmen and women to do their jobs and provide the basic services rather than, and without raising taxes 20% for a freaking library. Sorry, getting into Guelph municipal politics. This is a little bit niche today, everyone. I apologize. So Urian says, I'm so looking forward to this. Could have had Energy East, decided not to. Enjoy. And he's highlighting this line. It says, in 12 short weeks, on May 12th, 2021, Enbridge Line 5 will be forced to shut down by the state of Michigan, leaving significant energy shortfalls in Ontario and Quebec. Yes. Here's the article. Now, we've had some movement. We've had some discussion. It says, this issue has gone under the radar for far too long, and the majority of Canadians do not even know that this energy crisis exists. It appears that this issue is not getting the attention it deserves from the federal government. Yep, they said we're going to do a whole lot. Seamus O'Regan got in there. He said we're going to do a whole lot to make sure this doesn't happen. But we've known for years this has been happening. We could have been halfway down a pipeline to take it offline and not have to worry about it anymore. We could have even twinned the pipeline at the same time. Yay! Meaning two pipes instead of one pipe, right? But we can't build pipelines in Canada. That's illegal. That's illegal according to the UN. And we can't use the pipelines that we've been using for years. We have to go through this unbelievably painful, unbelievably inefficient shutdown in order to learn our lesson. And I don't even know that we'll learn our lesson. You know what they'll do? They'll say, this is climate change's fault. And we have to open up our green economy. Do you know what that takes? Billions of dollars. And do you know what happens after 10 years of billions of dollars and no results? We kick them out, put a new government in, and the new government says they spent a lot of money and they didn't get a lot of results. And we have less money and no green energy and no pipelines and nothing to show for it and 10 wasted years. That's what happens, because that's reality, right? If you drive your car into a ditch, your car doesn't magically, like Mario Kart, jump back onto the road for you. You have to call the tow truck, pay the tow truck, get the car out of the ditch, assess the damage, get the damage fixed, and then maybe you can drive your car again, maybe, if it's not too bad, right? Like, we're driving our country into a ditch, and it looks like we're doing it on purpose. And nobody understands that once the country's driven into the ditch, we got to call the tow truck, and we got to fix it. And there's absolutely no easy way to do it. It's not magic, and your parents don't have $1 million, so they can't buy you a new roadster. It's not working out that way. And this guy is not going to do it. It's not going to do it. O'Toole in a fight to keep control of a party hell-bent on fighting itself. When the Liberal Conservative Party wants to kick out all the Conservatives and keep the name Conservative and then tell Alberta that they didn't kick out all the Conservatives, it's going to fail. Watch in real time. And I don't know what it's going to take for people to realize that the Conservative Party of Canada is not conservative at all anymore. I don't know what it's going to take. During the Scheer years, people were saying we can't split the vote. We can't vote for PPC because we're going to split the vote. Now the base is saying, you know what, Aaron? Get lost, man. You said that you were a true blue conservative, and then now you're trying to be more liberal than Trudeau, right? And like, I don't think so. So Aaron O'Toole is a big. He's a worse disaster than Dion Phaneuf. No, not Dion Phaneuf. Oh, Dion Phaneuf. Dion. Oh, what was his first name? Stefan Dion. Dion Phaneuf is a hockey player. I think so. Is his first name Dion? Anyway, Stefan Dion. Stefan Dion was a disaster. Apparently, he was a very eloquent French speaker. But it would be like me trying to do my show in French. It would be terrible. Nobody would watch, right? And that's how Stefan Dion landed in English Canada, right? Everybody was like, what? Who's this guy? And why are we listening to him? So the Liberals have had their fair share of bad leaders. But yeah, I think that's a good comparison. Not Dion Phaneuf, Stefan Dion. Okay, we got a couple more things to get through before we're done. Former Prime Minister Harper says Canada caught in a new Cold War between the U.S. and China. I'll just read this. See if any 3 words jump out at you. Okay. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper says the world order has returned to a kind of Cold War between 2 superpowers, this time between the United States and China. And while middle power countries like Canada are part of the rivalry, Harper told a defense conference on Friday they lack the economic and security clout to do much on their own to shape the outcome. Yes, middle powers like Canada can play a role and should play a role, he said, but I don't think we should think that, especially for a country like ours, we could set courses completely independently of the big 2. Between China and the United States, if you were to take the last 5 years as a sampling, who would Canada side with in a hot war? I think it's the United States still, but if Trump was still in office, I would have more reservations saying that so quickly. But I don't know. Right? In a situation where tensions are rising between the United States and China, where does Canada fall? Right? I don't know. I really don't. The former Canadian Prime Minister gave his view of the New World Order during a wide-ranging question and answer session at a virtual gathering hosted by the Conference of Defense Associations Institute. Following the Second World War, the U.S. and its allies engaged in a prolonged Cold War with the Soviet Union and its communist allies and satellite states. Truman wanted to go to war with, he kept threatening nuclear war with Stalin, with the USSR, the Soviet Union. And it's a lot more complicated than that one sentence kind of makes it seem. So it's interesting. It's interesting to talk about the New World Order and Cold War between China and the United States without giving a bit more context. Are we in a full-blown economic war? Is this an information war? What kind of Cold War do you mean, Mr. Harper? Very interesting stuff. Silver Squeeze. This is a short history of government intervention in silver, a chronology going back to 1871, and the big one of 1873, where the price of a troy silver ounce fell from $1.27 to $1.11. So, I mean, very interesting reading if you're interested in the silver squeeze. I'm casually interested. I'm interested in so much in that money is interesting, and what's happening there is notable, very notable. GameStop was notable too. Okay, this is the last tab, and I had this flagged for yesterday, but it didn't end up on my list today, and I don't know why. Maybe I closed the tab accidentally. Sometimes that happens. But I'm glad I thought about it. Miss Alisev knows the answers to all the questions that she's asking. She knows them all. She knows that Sajan knows them all. Watch what happens. Here we go.
Thank you very much. Minister, who does the CDS report to?
The Chief of Defense Staff reports to myself as Minister of National Defense.
And who does the Ombudsman report to?
The Ombudsman provides reports to me.
And who do military members deserve a Chief of the Defense Staff who behaves in accordance with the Code of Service Discipline?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Who is legally accountable to ensure that the CDS behaves in accordance with the Code of Service Discipline?
You can't, Madam Chair, when it comes to allegations, as a Minister of National Defense, I do not investigate.
No,
they need to go to the appropriate
but who is ultimately
authorities.
accountable? Who do we look to make sure the Chief of Defense Staff behaves in accordance with the Code of Service Discipline?
My job is to making sure that everybody.
That's the sound of you losing that chess. So that was a fast chess match right up until the end when he realized he lost. Right? It was 3-4 moves and bam! And she was hitting the table because she knew that he knew that she won. And he was trying to dodge. And she's like, no, get back here. We all know what the answer to this question is. And you need to say it. So well done, Miss Alisev. She was in the military and Canadian military, and she was a former Liberal. I think I said that earlier as well. But interesting. And I gave the the CPC shit for making her a deputy leader because she was a former Liberal minister. And I mean, like, okay, maybe you've got cabinet experience and blah, 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 all that stuff. Fine. Maybe you're a good candidate because you've got an Ontario seat. Maybe that's good strategy. Okay, you can make an argument there. But it doesn't send the right message to the rest of the rank and file Conservatives that if you just go spend some time on the Liberal benches, right, come over here, we'll make you a minister, right? I don't know. It's not such a good message. Anyway, I think there's a lot of missteps in all this government, all of it from top to bottom, lots and lots of missteps. And will we get any relief? I don't know. When the government drives your country into a ditch, who's the tow truck company that you call to pull you out, right? And who gets to drive the car after, right? It's the blown out tire. They've driven us into the ditch because they didn't pay attention to the problem in the first place. And now who gets to drive the car, right? Nobody. The tow truck driver gets to drive the car. International Monetary Fund? I hope not. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful day. I'd call the United States. I'd call Donald Trump and say, like, listen, how much money do you have exactly? Could we borrow some of it? Okay, have a wonderful day.